Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today. This is your in-house Colts pregame show live at Nevermore. Normally, Locked On Colts podcast. We're doing a bit of a crossover. I've got my boy Andrew Moore here today. Of course, you know both of us from horseshoehuddle.com. Andrew is also one half of the Horseshoe Huddle podcast. Again, a noisy affair here. We are at a busy bar doing this show, so bear with us through any audio issues you guys might have. But yeah, obviously we're going to talk to you all about Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars today. It's a big one. Beginning of the Shane Steichen era, beginning of the Anthony Richardson era. And shoot, it's just finally time to play football. I can't remember an offseason that seemed like it drug on longer than this one. But before we dig into all that, today's show is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So everybody, we have made it. It is a football atmosphere finally. I got here to the bar at like 9:30 this morning. There's already, I walked from the stadium to here. There's already a ton of people tailgating. People are ready for football. And like, I don't even think people expect the team to be super good. It's just exciting. Like, there's a lot of newness here. New head coach, the most athletic quarterback prospect in history, and he doesn't look bad at all through the summer from what we've seen. So shoot, I mean, welcome to football season, Andrew.
Right. There's just an excitement around this team right now. It's so many new things, new quarterback, new coach, new era of Colts football. Yeah. So while expectations for this team aren't necessarily too high, there's excitement about this team, which is, it hasn't been really that much excitement around this team in a long time. So people are ready to see Anthony Richardson get out on the field, see this new offense, see what the defense can do in the second year under Gus Bradley. Yeah. And just walking around downtown Indianapolis this morning, fans are pumped to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll start with a little housekeeping, the news and notes before we dive into the game. But you could kind of call it news this morning. If you've had a pulse and been around here for any of the last month or so, it hasn't felt like news. But Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport both reported this morning. Jonathan Taylor is, I guess, expecting to come off, after the first 4 weeks of the PUP list, come off, pass a physical and play as early as week 5. And we all kind of knew he could probably pass a physical and could play at some point if he needed to. But we just didn't know how hard that stalemate was going to be. And so I've always thought the only way for Taylor to come out, not even come out on top of this, but like not be the biggest loser of the situation, is to come out and play and look like Jonathan Taylor, because he has no leverage. Like right now, you're a superstar running back, but you are 7-8 months removed from a procedure that should have been healed within 6 weeks max or so. You know what I mean? And so the running back position is already devalued. Teams aren't knocking down your door to go acquire that. So the only way he was going to be able to get what he wanted, which is either a new deal or a new team or a new team, is come back and look like Jonathan Taylor and convince teams that you are still that guy.
Exactly. And I think that's what the Colts have wanted all along. Mm-hmm. They want to see him come back healthy. They want to see him perform like the Jonathan Taylor of old. And in my opinion, if he goes out there and shows that he is Jonathan Taylor, easily top 10 running back in the league, more like top 5 running back in the league, if he can do that, I don't see the Colts having any issues paying him top dollar an extension. Now, do I think he's going to get Christian McCaffrey money? No, I wouldn't say that. But Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay have said multiple times, we're not trading Jonathan Taylor. We want Jonathan Taylor to be in Indianapolis. So if Jonathan Taylor can show that everything is healed and he is the Jonathan Taylor of old, the Colts have a history of paying players whether they play a premium position or not. So that's all that Jonathan Taylor, I think, needs. It's always been this argument of what's going on with this strategy, trying to make all these demands while he's still hurt. It'd be different if he was healthy. It'd be different if he was producing on the field, making these types of demands. But when you're not on the field, it's hard for the Colts to want to give so much guaranteed money to you when you're not even healthy at this point. And so I think that would be the best thing for all parties. And Ian Rappaport said this morning that the waters are calming. That's good. You could interpret that a lot of ways, but it sounds like the two sides are starting to cool off, and that's what both sides need to come to a resolution that is good for Jonathan Taylor. It can make him one of the highest paid running backs in the NFL, and for the Colts who want to keep their superstar running back for years to come.
See, that's the thing is the Colts didn't want to pay him yet, but I am curious, do they want to keep him hostage and use the franchise tag as a tool? Like, because teams have been using it as a tool to hold on to these guys without honoring the side of it and giving a multi-year deal. Now, if he comes back and looks like Jonathan Taylor, will they be willing to do like a 3-year deal? Because I don't think you want to give a running back anything beyond 3 years. You just never know. But yeah, and on his side, does he want to be back? Because we've heard the relationship is irreparable. His agent has basically said that, no one really knows except for Taylor in terms of that. So, shoot, I mean, maybe the Colts are willing to work with him for a deal. Maybe he proves to be that X factor, that catalyst that moves the offense. Like Anthony Richardson, of course, great, but like you can't do it all on your own.
Right.
And if Taylor, if his presence proves to be what we all thought it would be, like let's go back to April or May when we're like, wow, Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson in the same backfield. If that's what comes to fruition, then sure, maybe after the year they want to revisit and actually come to the table for it. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I don't know. And I really want your opinion on this one because Green Bay and Miami are the two teams that have been mentioned as the involved parties. And everyone's saying the Colts are crazy for asking what they've asked for, including Jalen Waddle. And it was reported this morning that Christian Watson is someone they wanted from the Packers. Everyone's like, the Colts are crazy. The Colts are crazy. Are they? Like, I don't personally, I didn't think it was insane to ask for Jalen Waddle because you're not going to trade someone without knowing they're healthy, or a team isn't going to get a player without knowing they're healthy. Is prime healthy Jonathan Taylor not equal to or greater than prime healthy Jalen Waddle?
Yeah.
Like, and I didn't think it was crazy.
Right. I don't think so either. And I think it's twofold. I mean, number one, people say, we've seen a lot of the national media talk about how the Colts don't value Jonathan Taylor enough to give him an extension, but they want top value out of him. In my opinion, that shows how much they value Jonathan Taylor and how much they don't want to part ways with him. They want to try to work this out. And if you listen to Chris Ballard, when he talked about this press conference, I thought he was very honest about everything. And
as honest as he can be.
Yeah, as honest as he can be. He can't obviously divulge everything that they've talked about, but he admitted the situation sucks, but he still has hope. And Jim Irsay has said, we want Jonathan Taylor to be a part of this team. So I think the narrative that the Colts should just give Jonathan Taylor away for pennies on the dollar, I really don't see any base in that.
Right.
And I don't think it's that far off. I mean, for how much they value Jonathan Taylor, if they're going to part ways with him, they want tremendous value in return.
Yeah.
And if other teams don't see that, I mean, you want to talk about other teams. Imagine, say, the Dolphins, this situation was going on with Jalen Waddle. I know they play different positions and everything, but Jalen Waddle is a valuable member to the Dolphins organization. They're going to want tremendous value in return. So why not? Why aren't the Colts afforded that same opportunity or that same privilege to ask for high value for one of their superstars? So I think that's why. If anyone's watching and these national media, we always say, listen to the local media, listen to the guys that have the tap onto this story, because there's not a narrative being pushed. The local guys are talking about this in a sense that is objective, while you don't exactly know where the other angles are coming for some of the national media guys. So, but I don't see a problem at all with what the Colts have asked, because in the end, they never really wanted to trade Jonathan Taylor in the first place. And I think the sooner people understand that, the sooner people will understand why the Colts ask so much in return because they're not, simply put, they're not going to give up a guy they think is valuable for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, and I heard another remark about, not wanting to pay money, but you are paying for a whale. I heard that remark again on a national radio show this morning. It almost drove me crazy.
The whale doesn't count against the salary.
Exactly. Your whale's not an offensive lineman, so it doesn't really matter. So here we're actually going to talk about some positive vibes. We're going to move on to this game, talk about the Anthony Richardson era. But first, I want to mention to you guys a word from our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Just add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and ultimately hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Andrew. So moving on to guys who are actually going to be playing in this game out there on Lucas Oil Stadium today. It all starts with Anthony Richardson. That's what everyone's waiting for. Everyone's waiting for pregame introductions, for the offense to come out, for the smoke to come out, and Anthony Richardson to be the last one introduced. That's what everyone's waiting on. And so the Jaguar, I think they get a decent matchup here because the Jaguars' defense, it's okay. It's not like this juggernaut by any means. They were near the bottom of the league against the pass last year. And, when you have a quarterback who obviously is a better runner at this point than he is passer, that's a nice little, that's a good little welcome to the NFL gift. Not that it's going to be a gift, like the Jaguars will make life difficult at some points, but this is not a bad matchup for him to start out against.
I don't think so. And I think early on we're going to see Shane Steichen put Anthony Richardson in places where he can succeed. Maybe try to get some very easy completions to him to build up that confidence. And this is something that Drake Wally and I have been talking about all week on
We See You, Drake
podcast. We see you, Drake, in here. I really think that the Colts are going to rely on the running game to get things started. And we've heard Peyton Manning say this. We've heard Andrew Luck say this. Usually there's some nerves for the game. Yeah. Obviously, Anthony Richardson, no matter how hard he tries, he's going to be juiced up for his first NFL regular season game. So you try to get him out, try to have him take a couple hits in the run game. I'm not saying anything huge, and he also needs to protect his body, but get some of those hits out of the way in the run game and in some of those calls so that way he can settle into the game. Easy completions, and then that's when you can start taking advantage over the top, which we all know Shane Steichen wants to do. I love when Zach says that Shane Steichen offense is like layups and three-pointers in the NBA because it's just so true. Shane Steichen wants to take those shots. He wants to stretch the defense. And so we could see shots for Alec Pierce, shots for Michael Pittman, trying to get Josh down some space to let him go to work. Yeah. And a big thing about this Jaguars defense, Shaquille Griffin is not here anymore. It's also there's going to be some change in that secondary, and that's where I think this Jaguars defense is still vulnerable and really haven't made any gains since last season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've got some nice pieces in the secondary. Andre Cisco, Tyson Campbell. There's going to be good matchups there. I mean, Alec Pierce actually had that game-winning touchdown last year against Shaquille Griffin, if I'm not mistaken. So, that's not going to be around. But the run game is something that's really going to be interesting today because, again, Zach Moss doubtful. We figured he wouldn't play anyway. So you're rolling with Deion Jackson as your starter, almost certainly. Evan Hall. And then Jake Funk is probably only going to play like maybe a couple snaps on offense. We'll see. But Richardson is essentially going to be he's part of the cocktail today. Like he always is going to be. But when you're down Zach Moss, you're down Jonathan Taylor, Anthony Richardson, this is like a wildcat today, essentially.
Yes.
So that's going to be pretty interesting. The Jaguars were middle of the league against the run last year. So we'll see how that goes. But they did give up. There was big performances to guys who could get out and move last year. Jalen Hurts, Daniel Jones, Lamar Jackson. Those guys average, I believe, 78 yards a carry or 78 yards per game. I gotta ease it with these enormous stats that I keep slipping. I said 1,000 yards a game on our last show. But no, like Daniel Jones had over 100 yards rushing in this matchup. So keep an eye out for that. Like, I'm not going to slap a bold prediction out there and say that Anthony's going to go for 100 yards, but he might. Like, they're down their top 2 running backs today, and the plan with him already was probably going to be to run until he catches up as a passer. So shoot, he might run 15 or more times today he might get 100 yards.
Yeah, I think it's all going to depend on how the defense is looking. And here's something else to think about is we talk about how much Jonathan Taylor is going to help out Anthony Richardson, and that's an argument for why the Colts need to get this thing wrapped up with Jonathan Taylor and just pay him. Well, I think the opposite goes into effect today, where I think Anthony Richardson can really help out the running backs because of his athletic ability, because of his running prowess. I mean, we even saw it in the preseason multiple times where on read options, the running back or the defender would have to sit for just a half second longer to make sure it wasn't Anthony Richardson running the ball. And that allowed Deion Jackson and Evan Hall to kind of get free a little bit, freeze those linebackers for just half a second.
Yeah.
So that way the Colts offensive line can get set, and it allows these running backs to kind of get just a little bit of a head start. And while half a second doesn't seem like much, it could be the difference between a 2-yard run and a 5-yard run, and those add up. So that's where I think it's going to be crucial. Anthony Richardson really needs to be on top of making the right reads in the running game as well. And as long as that happens and he can settle in, I think the Colts running game should be just fine today.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I think I've always said it would be fine regardless of who's back there. Like, they have to have NFL quality players back there, but just schematically because of Shane Steichen, I thought they would be okay. Like, something I noticed in training camp is just his use of spacing. Especially from like the shotgun and pistol, just open up run lanes. The offensive linemen are going to be out moving a lot more too. And that just, as long as you have running backs with vision, that's going to create big creases. We'll see what it looks like with Evan Hall. I mean, even rookie running backs can take a second to adjust. Like Jonathan Taylor wasn't Jonathan Taylor until like halfway through his rookie year. Evan Hall looks like a productive runner from what we've seen, but he's going to be seeing brand new things now. Deion Jackson could see 20 plus carries today because he's been there and done that a little bit. He's played some tough defenses. He had 10 catches against the Jaguars last year. So Deion Jackson might go, like, I don't know if he's going to go nuts, but he might have 20 to 30 touches in this game.
He'll be a big part of the game plan. And I know there's a lot of buzz around Evan Hall, and he could certainly be a big part of the game plan. But I saw a stat this week after the Lions didn't give the ball too much to Jahmyr Gibbs. Jonathan Taylor only had 9 carries in his first game with the Colts. So, I mean, obviously it's a different circumstance, different coach, different system. But at the same time, I don't expect Evan Hall to have a huge game where they rely on him for 15 to 20 touches today. He'll probably be the guy that gives Deion Jackson a rest, that change of pace back. While they're pretty similar in some things that they can do, Deion Jackson has already proven that he can be a reliable backup running back within the NFL. And like you said, last year against these Jaguars, the Colts used him very often in the passing game. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Deion Jackson gets 60-70% of the work at running back today, and I'm confident that he can at least hold things down in that role.
Yeah, I just don't see any big. I mean, you need Evan Hall because you just have a lack of bodies, but I don't think there's any big rush to like give him a big workload or anything like that. So, looking at the pass catchers today, Zach and I pointed out, Kylan Granson and Josh Downs are a couple guys that make a lot of sense to have decent performances. The Jaguars were just vulnerable over the middle of the field last year. You saw there, I cover this from a fantasy perspective, but I mean, it's statistics at the end of the day. I think the Jaguars gave up the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends last year. So Kylan Granson, he's tight end 1 essentially. He's definitely the top receiving tight end right now. Like Kylan Granson could have some big moments against Josh Downs because they gave up some performances to slot receivers last year too. So you look at those guys. I think Michael Pittman had a 10-plus catch game against them last year. I mean, as the X receiver, he definitely goes over the middle. So this may not necessarily be an Alec Pierce game. I don't know, but anything over the middle, the Colts might have. I'm not going to say an advantage there, but that's where they may look to attack.
All right, and we've kind of seen a couple different things from training camp and preseason, because obviously with how Shane Steichen tries to keep everything schematically close to the best. He didn't really show what we saw in training camp in those preseason games, but in those preseason games, you did see a lot of catches for Kylan Granson over the middle, and Drew Ogletree. Wouldn't put it past Will Mallory to possibly be out there as well, and catch some passes in the slot, because when he was out there with the second unit, he did perform. But Michael Pittman Jr. spoke this week, and I know you talked to him, Jake. He wants to be that security blanket for Anthony Richardson. He wants to be that guy where when Anthony Richardson is in a pinch and things start to break down, Pittman wants to be there for him. And he's done that for Matt Ryan. He certainly did it for Carson Wentz. That's kind of how I see Pittman doing it today. We might not see a huge catch by Pittman for 50, 60 yards, but it wouldn't surprise me if at the end of the day, Pittman has 8 catches for 94 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah.
Just a solid day. The guys over the top where you're thinking about those Alec Pierce, but so much of what Anthony Richardson did well throughout the summer was those throws over the middle to the tight ends, to a Michael Pittman, and then the quick winning Josh Downs in the slot. So that's where I would think that Shane Steichen would at least start the game, trying to attack the middle of the field. And that, again, will help Richardson settle into the game with those easy completions, get him into that rhythm, because every single time we've seen him out there, and goes for in practice as well, the longer Anthony Richardson is out there, the better he does. So he just gets more comfortable, and things start to go well for him.
Yeah, and obviously none of this works without cooperation from the offensive line. I'm confident in the starting 5. I think the starting 5 will be fine. Bernard Ryman, I've heard nothing but great things about him from, the coaches and Chris Ballard. They've digested the practice tape from training camp and everything. Like, they really, really like where he's at, and I'm confident in that. I think Will Fries is fine. But if any of those starting 5 go down, they might be.
They'll be in trouble.
No pun intended, but they might be hoofed on that, because no one behind them has a snap of offensive NFL game experience. None of them.
It's a very, very young group, and that's what the Colts. Chris Ballard always says, "Well, how do these guys become veterans? They have to play."
Yeah.
Well,
but you want some veterans first.
You want some veterans out there first, and you're right. If one of those guys go down, it's going to be tough. I think especially at the tackle positions, when you're talking about Ryan Hayes, a 7th round pick that the Colts claimed off of waivers from the Dolphins. Blake Freeland showed some flashes in practice, but we didn't really see it translate to the games too much in the preseason. And he's a guy that he's very, very athletic, but he's got a ways to go. He needs to build up his play strength. He needs to continue to work on his technique, just still very raw. And that's why I think the Colts are trying to take things slow with Blake Freeland, because I think eventually he could turn into somebody like Bernard Ryman. He's a moldable ball of play. Yeah. But as we all remember, Bernard Ryman started out last season and it wasn't good. And now what we have seen, he's made tremendous strides. But this team's really going to go as far as that offensive line goes, because you don't have the dynamic running back with Jonathan Taylor out there today. And you need to keep Anthony Richardson protected so he isn't rushed into mistakes as he continues to learn the NFL game. Again, 13 career starts at Florida. He just lacks those live in-game reps. And it's going to be a learning experience for all of those. It's going to be a learning experience for the offensive line as they continue to learn how Anthony Richardson plays, because we did see a couple holding calls when Richardson would get out of the pocket, start to run. The Colts need to clean that up. But I think Tony Sperano has really done a good job. This offensive line seems to have that fire back into it that we didn't see with Chris Strausser last year. It's just going to be the main key to keep these guys healthy all season long.
Yeah, and again, I think like a Blake Freeland, for example, is going to see a little action. I've got to imagine he's like the extra blocker in jumbo packages.
Mm-hmm.
Like they did that in the past with Danny Pinter to get him experience, and I think I think Freeland is going to be that 6th offensive lineman. So guys, At near the end of the show, we'll answer some of your questions. So go ahead and throw some of those in there. And we'll talk about the defense in a minute as well. But first, let's talk about some betting because, guys, it's week 1. Get your bets in. Set your lineups especially. Get ready for this NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets back guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's a huge deal because that ain't cheap. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. Who's going to score the first touchdown today? I don't know, but you can bet on it. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Andrew. So when I think about this defense versus Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars offense, the very first thing that comes to mind is the first matchup last year in Jacksonville. And the ball came out of Lawrence's hands immediately. Like they didn't have a prayer of touching him. And, the Colts were able to combat it. The game plan was a little different the second time around. I think it was week 6 was their second matchup. But that approach works. And so I asked Shane Steichen this week, I was like, when the offense is getting rid of the ball so quickly like that, like what can you do to combat that? Because sacks aren't going to happen. So what can you do? And it's basically disruption up the middle. So Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner as defensive line blitzers in general, defensive linemen as well, pass rushers, get your hands into passing lanes, disrupt those quick passes. And then in coverage, those defensive backs have to be immediate in their tackling. So I don't know what the Jaguars are going to do today. They're led by great leadership with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. But if that's the approach again, which we have seen work for them with flying colors, the Colts know how to combat it, but putting it into practice and actually doing it is another thing. So obviously, what concerns you most about Jacksonville?
I think you can expect Doug Peterson to attack that young secondary for the Colts.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Real
you
smart.
have Darrell Baker Jr. out there, Dallas Flowers, both of those guys getting their first career starts. Kenny Moore, obviously we know what Kenny Moore can be, but when you have the type of players that you do in Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, they've got talented guys the outside. Evan Ingram over the middle, and he can even be split out wide. So the Colts secondary is going to be tested. That is the weak point of this defense, until further notice. And until they can go out and prove themselves, that's where teams are going to continually try to attack. So I know we heard Gus Bradley and Chris Ballard both talk about how they want to implement more press coverage this season. We've seen Darrell Baker Jr. and Dallas Flowers both play pretty physically throughout training camp in the preseason. So don't be surprised if you do see a lot more press coverage to kind of combat that quick passing attack of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Try to get those receivers off their mark. Try to make it so Trevor Lawrence can't just zip out and out to one of his wide receivers because the Colts are having 7 to 10 yard depth with their cornerbacks. I would really expect to be physical at the line of scrimmage. That maybe mean that they're more susceptible to big plays over the top, but I would rather I'd rather take a chance of them trying to go deep rather than just dink and dunk down the field. Pass rush can't get anything. And then you're talking about the Jaguars running out the clock and going down and scoring 6 points.
Yeah, that's just so tough. Because, it's an obvious game plan. If you've got a high-end quarterback like that, you obviously want to attack this group of cornerbacks. Dallas Flowers, he was with the Colts last year, but he didn't really play until the end of the year.
Right.
Darrell Baker, nothing. Juju Brents, obviously nothing. So it's the cornerbacks are only narrowly more experienced than the backup offensive line. How we're speaking about that earlier. So it's going to be interesting. Baptism by fire. These guys got to learn. None of them look like liabilities, which is good. Darrell Baker Jr. He had a really solid summer. He was real steady. Like him and Jalen Jones were kind of similar to that. Like not a lot of peaks and valleys where you have like a Darius Rush, for example. Like he could get beat for a deep touchdown and then like make a brilliant interception the next play. You you don't have that big variance to those two guys' games, which obviously that's a big positive. Kenny Moore, I think they're going to be pretty reliant on him to be Kenny Moore and to be healthy generally, because he's been reinvigorated, from the sound of it. But he's one of two special playmakers on that defense. They have Shaquille Leonard back. That's one of them. And Kenny Moore is the other guy who is Houdini, can just like create plays out of thin air. So they really need Kenny to be that guy this year.
I'm interested to see how Gus Bradley deploys Kenny Moore this year. Obviously, last year, the two just didn't really mesh. Not personally. The relationship was good, but as far as Kenny Moore being in this Gus Bradley system, we didn't see the Kenny Moore we're used to, the guy that's out there making plays in the secondary and the Pro Bowl slot cornerback that we know he is. So it seems like they've had multiple conversations over the spring, and Gus Bradley has really made an effort to get Kenny Moore in positions where he can be a very good cornerback for this team again. And like you said, we've seen him in training camp. There's just a different energy about Kenny Moore. He's been out there making plays, even in one-on-ones. He's been very reliable as far as someone that will consistently be going for the ball in those contested catch situations. So very interested to see how Gus Bradley uses Kenny Moore in his new role this year, and how he can get him more involved and just in better places to make those game-changing plays that we got used to Kenny Moore making over the past 4 years.
Yeah, I think a Kenny Moore that's like fully bought into this system is a dangerous player for the Colts to have in their favor, because we saw with Matt Eberflus, it didn't take long for Kenny to basically have a master's degree in that defense. And we saw him ad-libbing within it, like baiting quarterbacks and just doing some like really unique things, taking a lot of chances. If Kenny can get to that point in this defense, like that's special, because like he knows how to win on those slot blitzes and things too. Like the guy just is really smart. He's usually one of the smartest players on the field when he's out there. So that'll be big for them to get him back. And I mentioned Shaquille Leonard as well. He's back, had the concussion. Obviously, his whole season was derailed by the back and lower leg stuff last year. 2 surgeries to correct that. Pleasant surprise that he got back in time for training camp, because Zach and I had a whole episode where it was like real solemn, and we weren't sure if maybe he would play again, but would he ever look like himself again? And things are generally looking up there. Like he should play today. Is he going to be 100% the maniac yet? We don't know, but he says he's getting closer. When he watches himself on practice film and things like that, he says he's getting closer. So for a defense last year that was pretty good for the most part of the season, the thing they really lacked was takeaways, and that is his specialty. So welcome back, Leonard.
Yes, and I think the Colts are welcoming him back with open arms. There's just a different energy with this defense when Shaquille Leonard is out on that field. And then you mentioned it, the turnovers. The Colts, they're leading. The guy with the most turnovers last year was rookie Rodney Thomas II, 7th-round pick out of Yale. So that was something they failed in majorly, and that's why the Colts had to go so many long fields last year, is because there just weren't the amount of takeaways were not there. So Shaq Leonard is going to have a big part in that. His football IQ out there is something that I think the Colts severely missed, even with Zaire Franklin out there, who I think has a very good football IQ himself. Yeah. Shaq Leonard has, from the moment he stepped on the field as a Colt, he's shown those instincts that you just can't teach. And with how he studies with those instincts, he's a lot of times in the right spot at the right time. And that's something that the Colts were severely lacking. His leadership, obviously, he was still in the building, but it's just different when you're out there on the field actually performing. So This defense is going to get a big boost with Shaq Leonard back. I know the Lucas Oil Stadium crowd is going to be very loud because it's a divisional matchup, because Shaq Leonard is going to be out there hyping up this crowd the entire time. I think that we're going to see, especially early, we're going to see a very fired up defense for the Colts, and that could, who knows, that could force Trevor Lawrence into some early mistakes.
It could, yeah, because Trevor Lawrence has some of that Andrew Luck to him too. Like very talented, very physically gifted quarterback, but like he has that like that arm hubris basically. Like he knows he can do anything with his arms, so sometimes it's gonna get him in trouble. So let's just shift back to the offense real quick. We'll go over some keys to the game, or like things you think are critical, or things you're like really looking for when it comes to Colts offense versus Colts defense. What's like a key matchup that you've got your eye on?
The Colts offense versus Colts defense, for me, it's Kylen Granson. I've been kind of down on Kylen Granson because I mean we've seen him get have some decent opportunities, but we're still waiting on him. Third year in the league, still doesn't have a touchdown, and so I think in a new offense, he also seems re-energized. Third year for Kylen Granson as well. Sometimes it takes a couple years for tight ends to come along. But I think over the middle of the field with Kylen Granson, his ability to separate is one of the best on this Colts team. So again, just getting those in those positions for easy completions for Anthony Richardson to get him into that rhythm, I think it's going to be key. So if my X factor or my guy to watch today on the offense would be Kylen Granson.
I think I'm going to say Deion Jackson. This is really just within the last couple of days. I've been talking myself more and more into it, just because I didn't really know what the game plan was going to look like. But you and I have been talking about it more, earlier in the show. Deion Jackson, I just think it may be the biggest factor of it is going to be his impact in the passing game. So Anthony always was aggressive, taking deep shots and everything. We saw that this summer in training camp. But when the Bears came in with the cover 2 defense, we saw 2 days of Anthony dinking and dunking. So he's willing to do it when that's what the defense is showing. And if Deion Jackson could wind up with 6, 7, 8 catches again on this, it's just what he's going to do with it after. Because he's okay after the catch, but he's a really good pass catcher in general.
Yes.
So I think today, if the run game's not clicking, we could see the short pass game be an extension of the run game.
Yes.
So we could see several of just really quick shots to Deion Jackson and Evan Hall, just essentially to try and skip a step in the run game and try and get a couple more yards out of it. That's kind of what I'm expecting to be a big deal in this one.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, again, it's all going to go back to getting Anthony Richardson into a rhythm, because the sooner he can get into the rhythm, as we've seen, he gets better as the game goes along. And something that I found really interesting, it was reported on by the Indy Star, was Peyton Manning and Anthony Richardson spoke on Friday, where Peyton sent him a good luck text, and Anthony Richardson asked for what any advice to give him, and he says, and Peyton said, just don't overthink it. Just go out there, play football. You know what to do. Just let the game come to you, and don't try to be the superhero. And I think as long as Anthony Richardson does that, settles into the game, there's going to be opportunities that this Jaguar defense gives him where he can make those game-changing, game-breaking plays, whether it's with his arm or his legs. So you just got to wait for those opportunities. And if that happens, I think the Colts are in a really good position to pull off the upset.
Yeah, I think this will probably be you never know whether the Colts are going to be a first half team, second half team, whatever. Sometimes they're a team that doesn't show up at all last year. But I think this will probably be more of a second half team this year. Richardson, just in general, I'm not even going to say mid-game adjustments and things like that. He just learns from his mistakes, and you don't see him make a lot of the same mistakes twice. If things are looking clunky, he can find a way to get the ball moving again. So I think they'll probably be more of a second half team. So looking at, it looks like Juju Brents is inactive today. We got to look at the inactives. Let's see. We'll take a quick break from this to see where the Colts inactives are. All right. We'll talk to you guys about that here. Let's see.
So it looks like it's Tommy Adebawore, Juju Brents, Sam Ehlinger with the third quarterback.
So Sam can come in if injuries or discipline come into play for Richardson and Minshew.
Ryan Hayes, the tackle they acquired from the Dolphins, is inactive today. Isaiah Land, another guy just acquired from the Cowboys off of waivers. Will Mallory, a guy I was just talking about as being a possible option. That's not going to happen as he's inactive. And then, of course, Zach Moss, who we figured would not be playing today for the Colts. So not too many surprises. Maybe some of the rookies. Obviously, Juju Brents had a personal issue, missed practice on Friday. So we're not exactly sure if that has boiled into some things or if it's a completely different issue. We'll have to hear from Shane Steichen after the game on that. But overall, it doesn't seem to me like there's too many surprises on that inactive list.
No, I mean, with Atatome, they have other guys, Taven Bryan, Eric Johnson, like he'll get in there eventually. This is, if I'm not mistaken, this is kind of what happened with Johnson last year.
Yes.
As a rookie. Like defensive tackles just take a while to acclimate. There's just a lot that goes into it playing the interior. So he'll come along. He'll get some active games, but health also dictates that they just don't necessarily need him in this one anyways. And again, they're probably preparing for the Jaguars to be more of a passing team today.
Right. And Jaguar is still, he was a freak athlete at the combine.
Yeah.
But when you look at his game tape, he's still very, very raw. So he's coming along. This isn't a guy that I think the Colts were expecting to have a major role this year. They want to bring him along slowly, and they don't want to put him out there before he's ready. So, but yeah, I think the Colts overall are going into this game very healthy, which is great to see. That hasn't necessarily been the case in some previous seasons. Right. So to only have one guy inactive because of injury, good start to the 2023 season.
Yeah, and that injury happened weeks and weeks ago. Zach Moss broke his arm at the end of July, and so this was expected. Like, he'll probably be back next week, but his conditioning has to get back, and you have to make sure that arm can withstand. Playing running back is not a gentle job. So. Guys, hit us with some questions here, and we'll start answering on those before we start making our pregame way over to the stadium. So, looks like there's a couple here. Coastal said, "Is it okay to roll with the 4 wide receivers, choosing to run more 2 tight end sets? We have plenty on the roster, and I feel like folks are overreacting." Yeah, I think just having 4 receivers looks scary on paper, but I'll just explain what the Colts are doing with that. A 5th receiver is really only going to play out of injury anyways. So you're looking for that guy for special teams. And we saw Juwan Winfrey come up today. That's a solid special teams player. Of course, he'll play some offense if injuries happen. And they will probably need to get an extra guy on the active roster at some point. But for right now, I think they're going to take this cavalcade of practice squad receivers and just kind of go week by week and see who best fits their game plan.
Right. And the Stats Matt, I don't know if Stats Matt's watching, but he brought up a good point this past week that last year the Eagles had 4 wide receivers on their active roster pretty much all year. So Shane Steichen has done this before. And like you mentioned, the Colts have plenty of wide receivers on the practice squad. I think it's 4 or 5 wide receivers are on that practice squad. Chris Ballard always talks about how those guys they consider them part of the team as well. So the Colts are going to bring those guys up. You have Kylan Granson, who is an extension of a wide receiver. Drew Ogletree played wide receiver in college. We've already seen his receiving prowess. And then Will Mallory as well, if they really need another receiving tight end. He was one of the fastest tight ends at the NFL Combine this year. So you have plenty of guys, plenty of pass catchers out there that, unless the injury bug really hits hard, I don't have a problem with them keeping 4 wide receivers on the active roster at this point.
Yeah, I think so. And I do think we'll probably see multiple tight end sets playing. Yes. I get Kylan and Mo for the most part. Like, I'm interested to see how much Drew Ogletree gets involved. We actually got a question here from Zach A. How many times will Ogletree be targeted? And then he predicts 5 times and catch at least 4 for 85 yards. That's high hopes. I mean, he's capable of. He's a physical freak, but we haven't seen him play yet in an NFL game. Of course, it's just a positive that he's back from his ACL injury from last year anyways. But I think he'll factor in. I think he'll have at least a few targets today, maybe 2 or 3 targets possibly, just because there's no, dominant tight end in this group. You don't have a Travis Kelce or a George Kittle. This is just a bunch of, they're a bunch of cogs in the machine, essentially, the machine that makes up the tight end group. So anyone who's active today probably get a couple looks.
Yeah. And with only 3 tight ends active, you're probably looking at Mo Alley Cox being that blocking tight end, and you're going to have Kylan Granson and Drew Ogletree be the receiving option. So I could see Drew Ogletree playing some snaps in the slot when Kylan Granson comes out, and vice versa. So we'll have to see. I mean, I think definitely look for Drew Ogletree in the red zone with that big 6'5" frame. That could be used, and we know Anthony Richardson loves to throw it up high to those guys. So I think if we're going to see a lot of work for Drew Ogletree. It'll probably be in that red zone area.
Yeah, absolutely. And our guy Drake called a touchdown for this, so he thinks Kylan's going to touchdown. This next one from Brody Powell. When do you think Jelani Woods will be back? So as far as I know, like after the first 4 weeks of IR, I don't think it's expected to be anything more dwindling than that. Like he honestly might have been ready to come back before that, but the 4-week cushion is probably something they wanted to give him that time to be fully healthy. Because if you guys recall, he had a hamstring injury in the spring also. Like he was out during OTAs and all that too. So they want to get he's probably going to factor in pretty big to the offense. They want this guy to finally get healthy.
Hamstring injuries are just so tricky. You can go out there, you can feel great, and then one false move and you're back to square one again. Yeah. So with hamstring injuries, you want to make sure they're completely healed so that way there's not a chance for a setback. So Jelani Woods said that he would probably have been ready to go in a week or two, but with those extra 2 weeks at least to just rest and rehab, it's going to make that hamstring stronger so this thing doesn't linger later into the season. So, yeah, I'm right there with you, Jake. I would think after about that week 4 period, you're probably going to see Jelani Woods back out for the Colts.
Yeah, now it may take them a couple weeks to get him like fully worked into it because conditioning might be a thing too. But we'll see. Next up, which wide receiver ends up with most yards today? Now, you had said you think Michael Pittman could be that guy with 90, 95 yards and 8 catches. Not like a big 15-yard per catch day, but decent day.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Pittman. Again, it's going to be that security blanket for Anthony Richardson. Shane Steichen was just so high on Michael Pittman throughout the entire preseason, throughout all summer. I think they really have held some things back of how they want to use Michael Pittman, try to use him more as that A.J. Brown type of X wide receiver in this offense. Look for Pittman to have a big day today.
Yeah, I think so. Let's see. We got a lot of predictions going on in the chat now. So shoot, yeah, I guess like if we don't have any more questions, let's get to our predictions. So I don't want to give the Colts 17 points yet. It's a young offense. They're still trying to figure this whole thing out with a new coaching staff as well. So I think it's going to be 24-17 Jaguars today. Okay. Like I don't think it's going to be a blowout. Like I think the Colts defense is still a decent group, even though the cornerbacks, they got to worry you until you see they're going to be fine. But I'm going to say 24-17 Jaguars.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. I'm going to give them 20. I'm going to go Colts 20, Jags 24. I think the Colts cover because I think the line was like 4.5 before we came in here. But I do think that it's going to be a lot closer than people think. You're going to see the Colts start to ramp things up as Anthony Richardson gets more comfortable. And we'll see how those young cornerbacks hold up against this Jacksonville offense. So closer game. It's going to be a really loud and exciting atmosphere in the Soil Stadium. So that
thing's going to be charged.
That could play a role into it. Pat McAfee's hitting the anvil. So the Colts might be able to get off to a hot start. We'll have to see. It's going to be a fun game.
Yeah. I want to do this last question here before we bounce. From Raul Ore. If the Colts win today, will the national narrative change? I appreciate it's one game, but you know what the media is like. So I don't think it's going to change much. Like I think divisional games are almost just a total crapshoot. Like you see bad interdivisional games all the time. Like the wrong team wins in those a lot. So I do think it'll make people make a mental note when they're considering what the Colts are capable of, but I don't think it's going to send them up the power rankings by any means.
I think if anything, it might juice a little the narrative about Anthony Richardson. There might be a little bit of overreaction about Anthony Richardson.
I think the media is ready to get fired up.
Yes, they are.
Like they want him to start his Rookie of the Year campaign for sure.
Yes, they are. So ready. I think that might be what happens. But as far as the narrative,
Mrs. Moore is making it.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. My wife is on there. So I think. I don't think it's going to change about the overall team, but it'll certainly make the city of Indianapolis feel really good about their team. And I'm sure it'll change the narrative and people will start talking about Anthony Richardson being that franchise quarterback sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it'll definitely generate a little buzz and excitement. But again, like they'll still probably be near the bottom of people's power rankings and things. But it will generate a little buzz for Richardson as long as he has a decent game. So thank you guys for being here with us today. This was fun. This is our second one. This one has already been a lot more lively than the first one. So, get your tickets. The link is there in the show notes. So come on out. Every pregame, home game out here at Nevermore. It's like 5-minute walk from the stadium. I park at the stadium, walk over here each time. So definitely want to see more of you guys out here in the future. If you're not able to be at the stadium today, the game is on Fox. Kenny Albert, Jonathan Vilma, and Shannon Spake on the call. If you're listening to it, catch the game on Sirius XM Radio. The Colts play the Jaguars today, of course, at 1 p.m. here in about an hour. It is the first game of the Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson era. Catch every snap of the Colts hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Just search for Colts. And, of course, thanks again to our hosts here at Nevermore. This place is awesome. It's a bummer that I have to work while I'm here most of the time. I need to start staying late or coming in early or something. But at Nevermore, get lost in literality and experience a place filled with intricate design and immersive experiences. From upscale food and spirits to music and entertainment, I'm seeing people killing this food over here. The food is awesome. Yeah, so it's definitely good stuff. Nevermore will never be a predictable destination for you. There's 25,000 square feet of space over here featuring multiple rooms. Right now we're on the stage where I don't know what this room is called, but it's a nice open room. Get more butts and seats here for as these pregame shows keep going, and we'll keep performing for you guys. There's also an elevated pub food menu as well as an old world style pub in the center of the space. It's got classic handcrafted cocktails, draft beer, wine, and seltzers. There's also a secret passage over there to a hidden speakeasy bar, a rooftop terrace, which has just an incredible view of Monument Circle. I honestly want to go hang out there at least once a week if I could. There's also a game bar back here with billiards, duck pin bowling. I'm sure you guys have heard some of the duck pin bowling while I've been talking. Arcade games and more. Visit Nevermore under the historic Union Station on South Meridian Street in Indy. Follow Nevermore Union Station on Instagram or nevermoreunionstation.com. Escape and explore the extraordinary at Nevermore. And everydayers, of course, Zach and I will be with you shortly after the game. Follow our stuff at horseshoehuddle.com as well. Andrew's always got stuff. Andrew, me, Zach, follow us all on the podcasts on horseshoehuddle.com. Drake Wally, our boy, if you're still watching, he's always cranking out the content as well. We'll have those two podcasts, the website. We'll have plenty of stuff wall to wall for you after the game. If you don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and you're Andrew Moore NFL now, right? Yes, I know you had to change your handle. I did.
At Andrew Moore NFL.
Yeah, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Also subscribe to Locked On Colts on YouTube and Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube and wherever you guys listen to podcasts. We would also love your ratings and reviews. Football season's here. Get those ratings and reviews in. Send us up the charts. And with that, we will see you guys after the game.